the books that I read in October, primarily Victober. It was kind of a mixed experience this Victober. I'd say that last year's Victober is my favorite one so far. And I do think a big contributing factor is that I had a more realistic TBR. And this year I just get so excited. You know how it is. You get so excited and you want to read all the books and just cram everything in there. And it was too much. So I was already feeling, what this year has been like. And we had moved in with my parents recently and we're about to move out, to be close to my husband's job. And so I'm feeling kind of a bit distracted and slightly disoriented for reading. I did still have, some great reading, but I think I just bit off way more than I can chew. And so when I was feeling, pretty excited, but a little bit distractible, and then I just had so much, and then I had several DNFs, and then a lot of 3-star reads, and Jane Eyre was my only, spoiler alert, Jane Eyre was my only 5-star read of the month. So I think that kind of just dampened my reading enjoyment, shall we say. So without further ado, though, I will get into the books. And the first one, that was a lovely, delightful surprise. And I did toy around with this being 5 stars, but I think coming out of it now, I'm still content rating it 4 stars. And that is Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I just, for some reason, was not thinking I was going to enjoy this, but it is told in such a whimsical way. There's so much that goes on in it. You follow Jim Hawkins, who at the beginning, he works at the Benbow Inn, and there are just some really kind of odd and suspicious circumstances happening around, just this little network of people, and some, sailors from far away with mysterious pasts show up, and Jim has to kind of put all the pieces together, and then there ends up being this crazy hunt for treasure. And so Jim is on this ship with all of these pirates, and he doesn't know who he can trust. It was just a really great adventure tale, and already I cannot wait to read it aloud to Peter. I think maybe when he's maybe 8, or between 8 and 10 would be a great age to read aloud. And Long John Silver as a character is wonderful. He's complex. You don't know what to make of him. I really appreciated Robert Louis Stevenson's characterization in this, that it was an adventure tale, but I still feel like I got to know the characters well. And then Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde, also by Robert Louis Stevenson. Unfortunately, this one was not as much of a hit with me, and I kind of was, I had flip-flopped that I thought I wouldn't enjoy Treasure Island and I would love Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde got 3 stars for me. One, I just was not creeped out enough, and I listened to the Richard Armitage audiobook, so I feel like I listened to a great reading of it. And 2, it just didn't grip me. I didn't really care about what happened. And I can't really tell you, it wasn't, this choice he made and this choice he made. It was just a very 3-star experience reading it for me. I love the concept of it. It was just the execution. I was like, oh, okay, kind of experience. Then one that I was very charmed by was The Book of Dragons by E. Nesbit. So this was published 1901. So E. Nesbit is more of an Edwardian writer, but she does have a couple books that were published in the Victorian era. And this is one of them. And it's a book of short stories and all involving dragons. I read this aloud with Peter, and I think that made it just a wonderful, wonderful reading experience. It was it was full of whimsy and just really funny things, like talking about a dragon that liked to eat, like the different foods it liked to eat, and it included prime ministers. There's a dragon that eats an entire village. There is just a lot of different fun, quirky elements to this story collection that made it really fun. So I think especially as a read aloud, it worked really well. And then Barry Lyndon by William Makepiece Thackeray. I was very excited and enthusiastic when I started out with this one. And this is how several of the books happened, that, I started out very excited about them, thinking they were going to be a 5-star read. And it ended up, as time went on, I just didn't care that much. And also Barry Lyndon he is such a sexist character. Like, I feel like, I don't often say that about something from a Victorian novel, because it's just, things are going to be different then. You shouldn't view it with the same lens, but he was just really obnoxious. I did not like him. And even like by Victorian standards, I'm saying, like, I did not like him. He was a philanderer. He was constantly talking about how other women's weight, and just awful. So I could have, still rated the book high if I enjoyed the plot, but I felt like I had whiplash from just how fast it was, all of the things that were happening. So it was amusing at parts, but I was just happy to be done by the end. And I did consider DNFing multiple times. Maybe I should have. I wish I had just kind of been willing to have a little kind of detective mystery on the go during this month, like a modern day one, to kind of refresh me. I loved Petra Yu. She talked about in her reading vlogs, she kept up her Victober stamina and energy because she read other things during the month. But what would happen is by the time I had finished all of the reading I needed to do in a day, then I'd be so tired and I wouldn't want to read anymore. So it was just this cycle that continued throughout the month. And also, it was a very bad fatigue month. So I shouldn't really be, beating myself up about how much I did or didn't read Victorian literature. I think just some months you're just not meant to have your best reading month. Then I read Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens. And I feel like a broken record now, kind of everybody asking me what my experiences was like. My experience was like reading it. And I think, sometimes you have these 3-star reads that you read it and you kind of chug through, like a 300-page one. But imagine reading a 840-page 3-star read. It really starts to feel like a 2-star read. And I wish I had not read it during Victober. I wish I had not. And what was such a bummer is that the lovely, lovely Tom from Tom Reads Things was buddy reading it with me. And I like barely checked in about the book because I was just so not interested in talking about it. And so I felt bad. I was not a good buddy reader. There were a couple plot lines that I loved. And one chapter towards the end did make me really excited. My heart was racing during it. I really like that aspect of it, but unfortunately, it was not really a favorite experience of this. Then Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre was a highlight of the month. I listened to the fabulous Juliet Stevenson audiobook. I was so happy that I used up an Audible credit on that. I had been kind of hemming and hawing over whether I wanted it, but then with just how unwell I felt a lot of the month, it was so nice just to sit and have this audiobook on. Juliet Stevenson does such a fabulous narration. And one of the highlights of the month for me was the Jane Eyre book discussion that we had on Zoom. So I will link it down below. I've now put it up on YouTube. Everyone who attended was so lovely and just happy to be there and happy to talk about books. And book people are the best people. And that is something that I kind of find, I really don't like making small talk, but I love talking about books. And it was just such a lovely group. And so, just delightful people there. Then one that was really a fun, good read, and that was Aurora Floyd by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. So this was a 4-star read, and this is about Aurora Floyd. And in the beginning, she starts to have this romance with her father's, I think they call it a groom. He's one of the, the servants. I think he drives the carriage around. And Aurora's father is having none of this. So he sends her off to Paris to school. She goes to Paris school and she comes back after a couple of years, and just there's something that is different about her. And it has a ripple effect then throughout the course of the book. I really enjoyed this. I find Mary Elizabeth Braddon's characterization very strong, and I love that she has a great balance of character development and plot, and the writing in this was just stellar. There were so many references to things I did not know about. It taught me a lot, and it was just really gripping to the end. And even towards the end, it ends up being this sort of detective mystery. So that was really nice. It was kind of this little It was a little bit of everything, and I love books like that. It had some really beautiful passages that I underlined. So I'm really happy to have have read another Aurora Floyd, another Mary Elizabeth Braddon book that I really loved. And then I just kind of gave up on Victorian literature towards the end of the month. I was like, you know what? Because the last few days of the last week, or the beginning of that, last week of Victober, I kept being like, I'm going to do so much reading. I still have like 5 Victorian things unfinished. I said, I'm going to do so much reading. I'm going to finish like 4 books this week, or even like 5 books. And then I would just avoid reading. And I was just in denial. So I have 5 things unfinished. I'm just planning on slowly but surely finishing those. And once I started reading more modern things, it felt like coming up for air. So I finished several things. And the first thing that I finished was An Heir to Murder by Charles Heathcote. Let me tell you what a year 2020 has been. I started this in February, and there was nothing wrong with this book. That there's no reason why I didn't get around to finishing it before this. I had about 20 pages left. This is a wonderful, wonderful, cozy mystery. I'm so proud of you, Charlie, if you're watching this. It was just so good. And now I really, really want to read the Doris books. A delight from start to finish, full of humor, like sharp, biting humor. I love. And really such fascinating characters. And the plot kept moving and flowing, like everything felt intentional that was in there, and just really, really wonderful. So if you want a good cozy mystery, I definitely recommend An Heir to Murder by Charles Heathcote. Then I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This was my very first Shirley Jackson novel. I have read The Lottery, and it chilled me. That story haunted me after I finished it. We Have Always Lived in the Castle was one of the strangest books I have ever read. I came out being like, what did I just read? And you know how sometimes you'll have that experience and then you'll decide, oh wow, it was amazing. That's what I just read. I read an amazing book. But this, I came out and I'm like, didn't really it was kind of a miss with me. So yeah, I'm sorry if this is a very negative, I feel like this is a very negative video, but it is what it is. So yeah, I read it. I've heard it's good for autumn, and I don't know what to make of it. I'm kind of glad to be through. Then I read Tears of Pearl by Tasha Alexander, or rather I finished Tears of Pearl by Tasha Alexander, and this was excellent. I gave this 4 stars. This is let's see what number it is. The 4th in the Lady Emily series. And in this one, they are in Istanbul, and there's going to be intrigue and deceit and treachery, all of these things. So Lady Emily is traveling with her husband, Colin, and as always, she ends up being where there are all of these crazy, intriguing things that are happening, and nefarious characters, and Lady Emily has to make heads or tails of it. It's a Victorian era, historical mystery series that I love, and I really enjoyed this one. And then I read The Silver Well by Kate Forsyth and Kim Wilkins. This was for my TBR 2020 TBR stack. So I'll talk about what I thought about that in a wrap-up video of my TBR stack. And I also read The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. This I only did give 3 stars, but that being said, I got a little bit bogged down with the plot, which felt a bit repetitive. But I am very excited to read more by Ray Bradbury. His writing was beautiful. I mean, it was stunning. It was so evocative of the settings that you're in, so visually it was very visual, and I could picture exactly what was happening, and it was just stunning writing. Like, the man knows how to write. And in The Halloween Tree, there are this group of boys. They're going to go trick-or-treating, and one of the boys, they can tell he is not feeling well when they go to his house to meet up with him, Pipkin. And they say, what, you aren't dressed up for trick-or-treating? What's going on? And he's like, I will catch up with you guys later. So they go on their merry way, and they end up at this house that has this crazy Halloween tree that has all of these jack-o'-lanterns on it, and just unlike anything else they've seen. The man that answers the door is really odd. He's like tricks or treats. And they have this kind of weird conversation, and he ends up telling them that Pipkin is lost and they need to go rescue him. And so they travel through like ancient Egypt and to all of these different locations to kind of see some of the origins of Halloween traditions. And so it just really involved them continuing, like, here's this place where they stop, here's the history lesson, and then they go to the next place where they stop, and then here's the next history lesson. So it felt a bit repetitive, and I got kind of bogged down. But that being said, it was only 140 pages, so it was not a hard task to read this. But I'm really excited about Ray Bradbury's writing. Really want to read especially Dandelion Wine and Something Wicked This Way Comes. Fahrenheit 451, I am not interested in, like, in the least. Dystopian, utopian, all of that, I could not be bothered. It's like a thing that I know appeals to a lot of readers, but for some reason for me, does not interest me. So I am really, really happy that I fit that in, because it did have a lot of like Halloween festive spirit about it, talking about trick-or-treating and decorations being up, all of that. So it was very festive and fun for Halloween, and I enjoyed reading it on the day of. It made the day feel like super exciting. Lastly, I finished Death Without Company by Craig Johnson. This is the second in his Walt Longmire detective series that is set in Wyoming, and it is a fabulous detective series. Like I said, when I mentioned the first one that I read before, it is just kind of what I never knew I always needed in a detective series. I have tried Westerns before and end up just not really maintaining my interest throughout the course of the book, but a detective mystery with a Western feel is just like perfect. It's perfect. An older woman is poisoned at an assisted living home. And so it's up to Walt Longmire to figure out who did this. You get to see a lot of returning characters in this. He has a best friend who is a Native American, and it's really touching to see kind of their friendship and how he learns from him, and kind of just to really be willing to listen to him, and uses his advice a lot in this case. And there are some Native American ties within the case, and I think that's going to be a running theme throughout this series, because they're really close to a reservation. And like I said, Henry is the name that this friend goes by, but he is Native American. And so that is a neat aspect of this that I really appreciate about it. And yeah, just really excited to continue on with the series. I love the narrator of the audiobooks. He has such a like gruff, rugged kind of voice going, and it's perfect for the audiobooks. Those are all the books that I read in October, so definitely a mixed bag. But you know what? Victorian literature is not just for Victober, right? And I have now started up my Victorian Read Along Most Victorian Patreon book club. I will link it down below the announcement video in case you did not see it and would like to join. I am offering a Patreon book club for $5 a month. We will discuss a Victorian novel every other month, and on the months that we aren't discussing one, we'll have a reading social on Zoom. And I hope that you will maybe consider joining. And I think a fair number of you were saying you wish you read more Victorian literature throughout the year, and it would put less pressure on us for Victober. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we're going to read. The poll is up now to see what our December, January book will be. And then in addition to that, I host a literary parlor, 19th century book club. So we do read some American authors. And that is at the Ebenezer Maxwell Mansion, just outside of Philadelphia in Germantown. And that is meeting virtually. So plenty of people could join in that as well. So I'm comforting myself that, all is not lost. Sometimes you just it's not the right time to really binge a ton of Victorian literature. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video, and I will be back for another video soon. Bye.